Do-it-yourself stained glass air plant pot. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to show you how you can decorate one of those wire air plant frames that you can get online with stained glass. Now this is me wrapping a basic metal frame with 7/32 inch copper foil. You can use any copper foil you want, but what you want is some copper foil on the metal so that it is solderable. Now I am taking adhesive paper and making a frame, a template kind of, to lay out my pieces so I can have them stay in place while I am doing the first soldering. I am using some 14 gauge bare copper wire and making a triangle for the outside of this particular side of my metal frame. And yeah, it takes a bit to bend them and get them the exact right size for your metal frame. After you've gotten it correct, I am going to stick it down on the paper, and this will help hold it in place. I'm making sure that it actually is the right size there. And then I'm going to stick it down like I did on that one on the paper. And then I'm going to fill the area with my stained glass pieces. Now I use these stained glass like little leaf shapes that are very, very thin. So they're a special, they're not like normal mosaic stained glass pieces. They're very, very thin. They're only like 1 millimeter thick instead of the normal 3 millimeters. And I'm using just normal nippers and cutting them and making them a little smaller for some corner pieces. Now I am foiling it. Now to foil this, obviously using the full thickness of your copper foil might be a bit much, so it would like encroach upon your glass almost all the way. So I cut the foil into strips. This particular one is half the width of my normal 7/32 inch foil. And you just cut them with scissors. It's really easy to cut foil. And then after you have foiled your little piece, you want to burnish it down. I use these little plastic fids that that are very handy. Anything works just to hold them and smooth them out and make them so they stick really well before you start soldering. Now I use the black foil just because that's what I like to have in case you have clear glass. You won't have that shiny coppery look on the inside once you have finished. I never know, well, sometimes I know, but I usually don't know if I'm going to leave it the coppery or, I mean, the silvery color of the solder, or if I'm going to patina it in copper or black. So I like to have this, use this black foil, black backed foil, so that I have, you know, any decision that I later I can decide later. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Okay, so, and then if I have extra pieces that I have foiled that I didn't want to use for this particular project, they're just there and they're all uniformly foiled so that I can use them on any project. So I usually do a whole bunch, and then I can decide later, you know, while I'm putting them together, I can just pick and choose what pieces I want to use. So I foil the full leaf shapes, and I foil the ones that I cut. And the reason I cut them, you'll see in my final project. That's, see how you can, how I use partial ones for the edges. Right now I am tacking all of the pieces together while it's still stuck to the paper, and then I can peel it off the paper and do the other side and attach that side. Now the sticky paper is just one way to organize your glass before you start soldering everything together. And because these pieces are so small, it's kind of hard to hold them properly while you're soldering. So it's easier to have some way to hold them in place. I found that the sticky paper also helps keep them from deforming and bowing while you're doing the initial solder. And I'm actually filling those little areas that were empty, as you saw, that you know, the spaces between. I'm filling those with solder. So there, the spaces are a lot smaller than they might look, because remember, this whole thing is very small. And as you can tell from my solder iron and my piece of solder there, that this whole triangle is like, oh, about less than 2 inches by 2 inches. I mean, it's like really quite small. And then I have the little circle. So sometimes I'd like to incorporate different shapes. And I have little circles that I had foiled also. And I incorporated them into my design. Now you notice that I set that other one aside for a minute. You do that because if you start soldering, especially on something this small, and you solder too much on the project at once, you could be heating up more than you really want to, and then the areas that you didn't really want to work on start moving on you. So it's usually a good idea to go from one piece to another while you're working so that you don't inadvertently heat up the wrong piece. And it's kind of fun to do these little projects because they don't take a real lot of time, and they're nice to have, and they fit in anyone's house. So you can, you know, give them as presents or whatever, and they don't really take up a lot of space. So as you see on this particular side, I use 3 of the circles. I like to have each side of my projects to be different, so that's why I have, you know, kind of a variety of setups. I'm actually using the thinner, I think it's 2 millimeter solder, which is just a little bit thinner than the standard that you can get, and that makes it so that I'm not getting too much solder at one time when I am working on my project. And I'm making sure each one of these pieces is properly finished. You do want to turn them over and over a few times, because as you're soldering one side, the solder might bulge out to the other side, and then it wouldn't look very good. You don't have to solder the back side of projects. It's just, especially on these really small projects, you don't really have that much adherence, and if you solder both sides, they just stay together better. But obviously I'm only really worried about the main side. So you can see that this particular frame has been foiled all the way around. Every part that I want to work on has been foiled, and right now I am tinning all of the parts that I'm going to attach my triangles to. Now, the reason I'm pre-tinning everything this time, I don't always pre-tin, is I'm not going to really solder that much on, you know, the surface I'm soldering to is just that wire that I put on the triangles. So I want to have everything already pre-soldered so that the solder will take to this a lot better than the copper foil, Now, the copper foil does accept solder very, very nicely. It's just that having it pre-tinned is even more, um, more better at having the solder attached. And that way it's all completely soldered so that if I want to use black patina, which is what I ended up using on this, so that it matched the top part of my little frame, I won't have to worry about tinning the rest of the copper, because the copper itself, the copper foil, will not accept patina, so it would end up being that coppery color. Now, if I was going to end up having it coppered patina, I really wouldn't worry about it, because the copper patina is very similar to the copper color of the wire. So I use various items, whatever works, to help hold my piece in place while I am soldering. I have these little clips that were very, very handy for this. And basically, I am trying to just tack it in place where it meets. Now, obviously, these triangles are not as perfectly flat as they were originally. Actually, they weren't perfectly flat anyway, because they just were wire that I bent. So they're not going to solder perfectly, flush to the frame. So I am going to have to just tack it wherever it meets the frame, and know that once I get everything together, it will stay together. You can see now that I am actually soldering the two pieces together at that seam, and that will help hold them together. And wherever the triangle happens to actually touch the frame, I'm going to solder it to the frame. I'm trying to get these seams that I'm making as smooth as possible. Now, when you get to the end, it's usually best to put like the last couple pieces in, and then kind of adjust those two as you can, because life is not going to be perfect, so there's going to be some little adjustment to make them look good. I'm wearing silicone gloves here, and silicone gloves are very handy because they obviously keep your hands clean of the flux and stuff, but being the silicone, they don't melt as easy as like a nitrile or latex glove, and they're not as cumbersome as like fabric gloves. And they also help dissipate the heat. So if you get a little bit of solder on you, or you are holding your project a little bit too long while you're soldering, you won't feel the heat immediately. So that's a plus. Now you can see I have that gap there. Now that kind of happens with this kind of project, that things don't go perfectly together, but I'm going to want to fill those gaps. So basically I'm going to have to add solder, or I could add a little bit of foil or a copper wire, or like I'm doing right here, just solder. But you're going to have to like drop the solder in place and try to smooth it over. Not going to want to do it all in one fell swoop, because you will heat up the solder too much and it'll just fall out. So you're going to want to try to do it slowly and actually kind of like hold your solder above your project and just kind of drop the little bit colder solder into place, and then just heat up the top layer of the solder to smooth it out somewhat so it doesn't look weird. And then I kind of look at the inside, look around the edges, see if there's any other places where I can attach some solder to help hold all of this together. Not that air plants are very heavy, so I don't have to worry about that, but I just want it to look good and all that. I'm not going to actually light this like I do most of my projects, so it's not like I have to worry about little cracks where light would come through, but I would like to have it as consistent as possible. Now this is the foil I do use all the time. I like this particular brand. It's not terribly expensive, and it's that black back stuff, and it sticks really well. So after I washed it, I am putting foil around this top edge to kind of fill that gap that I have there, because I think that'll look better. Now obviously I had to wash it first because the foil would not stick to that fluxy, yucky surface that I created from soldering. So you're going to want to wash your project first, and then if you need to add foil, foil won't stick unless you have it all clean first. So I'm doing the edge itself now, and this will make a nice finished edge there where there was that uneven gap between the original frame and my stained glass pieces. Now I will put materials on the description page if you're interested in the glass and the frames, you know, things that I used in this project that you might need to source out, because I do buy a lot of my stuff on Amazon. I am a affiliate, and I will get a little bit from your if you do happen to sell buy stuff. Now you saw me patina that, and I am using linseed oil, and I am putting a coat of linseed oil on my project to kind of finish it off so it's not that dull color, it's a little bit shiny. And then I'm going to rub it with a paper towel and get the excess linseed oil off of the project, and then also make the little pieces of glass shiny and clean. And so this is the finished project. It was really, really cute. And thanks for watching. And have fun making your own projects. Until next time, bye-bye.